Okay, today's daf yomi is Kiddushin daf Ayin Vav. This is the daf yomi for Shabbos Kodesh. Should be a Yeshua Tzala for all of Am Yisrael. May the captives be released speedily from captivity so that they could spend Shabbos with their families. So we're going to start on the bottom of Ayin Hey Amma Beis, around 10 lines from the bottom. We're trying to explain why Rabbi Eliezer says a kuti, a person from that's called a kuti, cannot marry a kusis, a woman from the kusi. So says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, shalosh machokas b'davar. It's really a three-way dispute. That Rabbi Shmuel is of the position that kutim are geri arayusim. Rabbi Shmuel is of the position that kutim were people who only converted out of fear of the lions, so therefore they're not Jewish, and so therefore a kohanim shenidmu b'hem, kohanim who became mixed up with them are going to be considered like psulim hayu. So therefore, if there's a kohen that mixed up with them, we're going to consider him to be no longer a valid kohen. Shenemar, as it says, v'asuam miktosam, v'asuam miktosam kohenei bamos. Rashi says this is a pasuk in the book of Kings with respect to the Kutiim by the exile of Sancheriv, that he exiled the tribes in the time of Yoshua ben Allah. And it says, the Amar Rav Bar Bachana, what does this verse mean? Amar Rav Yochanan, Minakotzim Sheba'am, and he made them from the kotzim of the people. Rashi says from the disqualified ones. So therefore, the Kohanim are no longer Kohanim. And that's why Rabbi Eliezer disqualifies them. First, Rabbi Kiva saw the position that Kutim are Geri Emesim. He says the Kutim are valid converts. The Kohanim Shenidmu Bayan Kohanim Ksher Mayu. And if there was a Kohen who married amongst them, he would be considered a kosher Kohen. As it says, Miktosam Kohane Bamos. And what does Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan, that the best ones amongst them were bringing offerings. So what does Rabbi Eliezer say? A kuti cannot marry a kusis. Because the kutim had this very strange position. They said when it comes to yibum, you only do yibum with the betrothed, with those who are betrothed. Top of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, upotrim and nesulas, but the ones who are fully married, they don't do yibum, and so therefore we'll see what the consequence is. Am I darshi? And what was the drasha? Why did they only do yibum with the ones, or chalitza with the ones who are betrothed, but not the ones who are fully married? Because it says that the wife of the deceased should not be with a foreign man. It means to say that who does this refer to? Says the pasuk, the one who was actually just sitting outside, i.e., not fully married. So that's the one who that's one who can't marry somebody else until there's yibum or chalitza. But the one who's not sitting outside, she's indeed allowed to be. The one who is fully married is allowed to be with another man. And therefore, since they don't do yibum with a woman who's fully married, Rabbi Akiva follows his logic. He says, therefore, she's a shomer yavam, and if she doesn't have yibum, it's a regular prohibition, and therefore creates a mamzer. So maybe they're mamzerim, and so therefore they can't marry each other. Some say it's because they're not careful about certain mitzvos. Who is the Yesh Omrim? Amar Avidi bar Abin Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanya, Matzah Kusi Muteres. They say that the matzah of a matzah that kusi makes is permitted, and a person can fulfill their obligation on Pesach. So therefore, on the first night, that the matzah is obligatory to have shmur matzah. But Rabbi Eliezer prohibits it because they're not careful about mitzvahs. So therefore, since they're not careful, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Kol mitzvah shechsuku b'kusim harbe medachkim liyoser b'Yisrael." But Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says any mitzvah which the kusim do, they're more careful than the regular Jews. Now, what does it mean they're not experts? They're not careful about the laws of marriage and divorce. And so therefore the children are going to be mamzer. Amar Nachman, Amar Rabbi Barafua, mamzer me'achosu, mamzer me'ishas ach. Let's say there's a mamzer from a man with his sister, mamzer from a woman with her brother. Nisarvu b'hen. They got mixed up amongst the kusim, and that's why you can't marry a kusi for another kusi. Versus my kamashmalan. What's he coming to teach us? So he's coming to teach us Yesh mamzer mechayve krisos. He's coming to teach us that even though it's a penalty from kares, we saw that this was an earlier dispute. What makes a mamzer? And if it's a penalty from kares, it makes a mamzer. The Gemara says, well, why don't they just say one of the kusis? Why do they have to say both examples? Gemara says, that was the actual incident, that these two types of mamzerim got mixed up. Rabba Amar Eved v'Shifcha nesarvu b'hen. Rabba says the Canaanite slaves became mixed in amongst the kusim, and so therefore, nesarvu b'hen, the Eved and the Shifcha Canaanis married amongst them. And so therefore, we ask the question, if that's the case, Isur Mishamai, Isham Shivcha. So what's the problem? That they're not Jewish, because in Eved Kochavim and an Akum and a slave that was with a Jew, the offspring is kosher. But if it's a Shivcha, then it's not Jewish. So if that's the case, Nisni Chada. Why we should only say the case of the Shivcha? Why do we have to say the case of the Canaanite slave? Gemara says, well, that's what happened. So therefore, they're telling us exactly what happened. Okay, the Mishnah now says, Anose Isha, a man who marries, Anose Isha Kohenes, a man who wants to marry a Kohenes, meaning to say, Rashi says that he wants to marry this woman who's a daughter of a Kohen. He needs to first investigate after her. Arba Imos Shein Shmona. He has to check her 4 mothers, which really is 8. And we're going to see who these are in a moment, but we'll read the Rashi. Bodkin Bedorosea, meaning to say, what are we checking? We're checking that they're not mamzeros or somebody who can't marry to the community. And we check the 4 mothers, 2 on the father's side, basically the 2 grandmothers on her father's side, and the 2 on the mother's side. And that each one of those, meaning to say, each one of those has their own mother. And so therefore they has their grandmother. So we're going to her maternal fathers, her paternal grandmothers, and her maternal grandmothers. And that's how we get and their mothers. And that's how we get to 8. So the Gemara says, who are these people? Ima ve'emima, the mother and her maternal and her grandmother. Ve'em avi ima, and the mother of her father's mother. Ve'ima. Ve'em avia, the mother of her father. Ve'ima, and her father's grandmother. Ve'em avi avia, and the mother of her father's, the mother of the father of her father. Ve'ima, and her mother. And Levia the Israelis, and when it comes to Levite and the Israelis, we add on another mother, one mother from each and every pair. For example, Rashi says the mother and the mother of her mother and her mother, and so too for all of them. And Ein Bodkin Woman, we don't check from the altar and onward. Meaning to say, if they were approved for the altar, that's good enough. Woman Aduchan, or if they go on the platform. Woman Sanhedrin, nor from the Sanhedrin, if they're on the Sanhedrin. And anybody who has a presumptive status that they're one of the Shotrim, meaning one of the officers for the people, the Gabai Tzedakah, or someone who gives out charity, Masiyan L'Kuhuna, they indeed can marry a Kohen. You don't need to investigate. Rabbi Yossi says, Av Misha Yachasum Aid Be'arke Hayeshana Shal Tzipori. Also, somebody who was signed as a witness in the courts of Tzipori. Rabbi Chanina ben Antoninus says, Av Misha Yamuchtav Ba'astratia Shel Melech. Also, somebody who was established amongst the astratia of the king. We'll have to see what that is. The Gemara says, Ma'ishna benashi patkinan. How come we're only checking the mother's ancestry? Ma'ishna begavri, well, batku. Ma'ishna. Why do we check the mothers? Ma'ishna begavri, and how come by the men are we not checking? So the Gemara says, no, when it comes to women, the kiminsu ba'adei, when they fight with each other, they're accusing each other of being adulterous. Milsa, and if there's a problem with the yichus, well, it's like, oh, they wouldn't talk about it, so we wouldn't know. But gavri, but men, when they argue with each other, they're arguing with respect to lineage. And isa the ika milsa, and if it's the case that there is a problem with the lineage, we would know about it. Gemara says, "V'ihi nami tivdok." So if that's the case, the Gemara says, "V'ihi nami tivdok beibedidei." So the Gemara says, why do you have to only check her lineage? The Kohanes who wants to marry the Kohen, she should also check her husband's lineage. Gemara says, she's not prohibited to marry into somebody who's disqualified. It's only the man who's prohibited to marry a woman who comes from a halal. Okay. So now the Gemara says, Ravada Barahava, he said, Dawadi Mahos, Tani, he taught this when he was teaching it. And you're supposed to check Arba Imos, 4 mothers, Shem Shtei Esrei. In addition to checking, which is 12, because in addition to checking the mother of the girl and her mother, and also the mother of her grandmother. So he has to check not only the mother and the grandmother, but the mother of the grandmother. And so therefore, he's checking 3 generations, and each one is 4. So therefore, we're going to get to 12. But in a different price, we learned that it comes to 16, because in addition to the mother and the mother of the mother, and also the mother of the grandmother, you're supposed to check. And also, in addition to that, the mother of the mother of the mother of the mother. So you're checking 4 generations. So Bishlam Ravada Barada, it makes sense according to Ravada Barada, Mukimwa Bulavio Bat Yisrael. He could say that the price of that check requires 12. That's talking about a Levi and a Bat Yisrael. Oh, Masnisa, but the price that says you check 16, name a pligi, you want to say it's arguing with our Mishnah? No, when the Mishnah says Od Achas, it would mean to say that when you add on another one for the Kohen and for the Levi and the Israel, it means Zugachas, another pair, 2 mothers for each one of the 4, and so therefore you're checking 16 generations, 16 total mothers. So the 2 brises are arguing, but the brises are not necessarily arguing with Mishnah. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, so he says, Zu divrei Rabbi Meir, that this idea that you need to check the families, that's the position of Rabbi Meir. But the Chum say every family we assume is kosher. This is really the case. That our Mishnah is only when there was a problem with them. But if there's no problem, you don't need to check. So the Gemara says, well, the one who taught this did not teach this. Meaning, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Meir. He doesn't agree with the idea that it's only when there's a problem that you need to check. Alternatively, our Mishnah that says you need to check, that's the position of Rabbi Meir. But the Chachamim say, but the Chachamim of the position, Chachamim say they're all kosher always. And you have the presumptive status of the kosher. But if there is if there is a problem, then you need to check. In both once they reach the altar, you don't need to check. My timer. Because in order to work on the mizbech, they first need to investigate you. So therefore, it's good. My timer. What's the reason why we don't check from the platform and onward? My timer. Amarav. Sham ayu yoshvim. Because that's where the Kohanim and Leviim who had proper lineage would sit in that place. So it means that from the fact that they're there, it means they have good lineage. Once they're in Sanhedrin, you don't check. My time. The Tani Rav Yosef, Kashem Shabeis, and Menukim Mitzadek, sometimes like the fact that the court needs to be free of any suspicion. So do they need to be free of any blemish? Amar Marim or Mikra, what's the pasuk? It says, Kulach yafer rayasi umum ein bach. It's in Song of Songs that you're so beautiful, you have no blemish. So therefore, that verse is talking about the Sanhedrin because they don't have any problems with their lineage. So the Gemara says, how do we know that refers to a problem with the lineage? Ema muma mamish, maybe refers to a physical blemish. Amar Chabar Yaakov, so therefore the Gemara says a different verse. Amar Kra, that it talks about that Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, together 70 elders, appoint them to the Sanhedrin, and they'll stand there with you. Imach b'domimach, they'll be similar to you. It means to say that they have impeccable lineage. But Gemara says, v'doma, maybe that case is different. You need to have impeccable lineage, misham shchina, only because of the shchina to rest on them. But generally they don't. So therefore, Amar Nachman Makrov, Akel me'alecha v'nasu itach. It says, Yisro gave advice about appointing judges. It says, they'll make your job easier and they'll carry the burden with you. It means to say, b'domimach, they have to be similar to you. And then it says, anybody who was appointed as a presumptive status of being an officer, you don't need to check. The Memra, the lomok minon mipsuim. So it means to say, you don't appoint judges for monetary matters from people who have this defect. Or I mean, is this really the case? Everybody's kosher to judge monetary cases. Everyone could do monetary, but not everyone could do capital cases. And we say, what does it mean when it says everyone to include what? It comes to include a mamzer. And a mamzer is kosher to judge. So even a mamzer could do dini mama. So the fact that they're doing a monetary case doesn't mean that they're good. So Amar Abaye says, our mission is talking about the judges in Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. And he said this in the Rashi says that this refers to the Tosefta that was produced from the house of Levi. That this is a reference to Yerushalayim, only those people from Jerusalem. The Kiddushin Levi, that's Rashbam says that refers to a Tosefta on Kiddushin that Levi arranged, and our Mishnah is talking about the judges in Jerusalem. In other cases, the fact that they're a monetary judge doesn't mean anything, that they're good lineage. Gabait stuck on Masim, that you could appoint the collector of charity, you can marry to the kahuna, you don't need to check after them. My timer, giving them minsu ba'adei inchi, since they fight with people, the Amar Mashkin out stuck of a fil bar of Shabbos, they're allowed to take their possessions as a collateral for charity, even on Erev Shabbos. So people fight with them. And Misa Deika, if they had a problem with their lineage, it's like, oh, people would have said it. Which Bezichne, the Ravada Barabba Giyore. So Ravada Barabba's host was a convert. Say, ew. And he was say ew. And Rav was fighting with them. The Rav Bibi. So basically the host of Rav Barabba was a convert. And the Kamatse Iyu, Rav Bibi. And so the host was fighting with Rav Bibi, who will be in charge in certain positions in the city. Mar Amar, one of them said, Ana Avina Sarura Damasa, I should be in charge. Mar Amar, Ana Avina Sarusa Damasa. And the other one said, I should be in charge. Also, Kame the Rav Yosef. So they came to Rav Yosef. Amar Rav Yosef said to them, Tanina, Som Tasim Lecha, Melach Mikar Vachecha. You have to appoint a king upon you from amongst your brothers. Whoever is in charge of you has to come from your brothers. So we see from here, so Rav Yosef was saying the person in charge of the town should be Rav Bibi and not the host. Ravada Barabba says, well, what would you say? In this case, this convert, this person, his mother was Jewish. I mean to say, he had a Jewish mother, and even though he was called, so why is he called? He's called a convert because his father was a convert, so he had the lineage of his father. So then Rabbi Yosef said, no. No, if his mother was Jewish, we don't call him a convert, we call him amongst your brother. So then Rabbi Yosef said a different approach. He says, Bibi is a great man. I am B'miyod Deshmai. I put him in charge of the spiritual aspects of the city. Umar, I am B'miyod Demalsa. And this person who we call the convert, he should be in charge of the civil matters of the city. So anybody who hosts a rabbi as his guest, la'ashrei, to Rav Ada bar Abba. He should host the Torah scholar like Rav Ada bar Abba. The other he knows how to find your merits, and he helped this guy get his job as basically the mayor. Rabbi Zera used to get involved with converts to put them into different positions of authority. Rav Ada bar Avua, he also Rav Ada bar Avua. But the Marava, Afilu Reish Kuri, but in Eretz Yisrael, they wouldn't even put them in charge of the weights and measures. Lo miklu minayo. But in Ardai, Afilu Reish Karkuruta, they wouldn't even put them in charge of the irrigation. Lo miklu minayo. Rabbi Yossi says, Mi shahaya. It says also somebody who was signed as a witness in the court in Tzipora, you don't need to check his lineage. My timer, they used to check the witnesses to make sure they had proper lineage. But Antagonist also said somebody who was registered in the astrology of the king, you don't need to check him. I'm just talking about those people who are warriors for the house of David. Rav Yosef Mikra, what's the verse? How do we learn this? It says, V'hit yach sam b'tzava b'melchama. So therefore, meaning to say they were known by their lineage, they went through the people who are fighting in the battle. We see that somebody who's fighting in a battle has the proper lineage. And the time of my, what's the reason that they made the Chayolim have the proper lineage? So that the soldiers would have their own merits and the merits of their fathers protecting them. Gemara says, but really, amongst the warriors of David, it were Tzelek Amoni. He had Tzelek the Ammonite. My love, isn't it the case the Asim Ammon that came from Ammon? Versus no, the Yosef Ammon. He lived amongst the Ammonites. But you go Uriah Achiti. Uriah Achiti. My love, the Asim Echet. Versus no, the Yosef Echet. He lived in Chet. Va'ika iti agiti. What about iti agiti? V'chitei ma'achin namid Yosef Begad Mamrav Nachman iti agiti baru bitla. He came and he canceled the crown of idolatry of Bnei Ammon, who's called their king. David had 400 boys who were in his army. And all of them were very good looking. The Kuan, meaning to say they were from Anshe Yefastor. They came from the women who were Yefastor, meaning to say they came from these women who David captured in battle. So they didn't have this lineage. They were born from these women. The Kuan Mistaprim Komi, all of them had their hairs in this special way. Megadlim Purias Hayu, and they left their hairs in the special haircut called the Purias haircut. And they all sat in these golden thrones. And these were the warriors of David. So the Gemara says, okay, these they weren't the warriors, but rather the Azli of Usabama. They were just going to scare the people. So therefore, we say that if you were a soldier, it means you have a good yichus, because you need to have not only the schus of their own merit, but also the merit of their ancestors to protect them. But we say today that we know that there are many people who are fighting in Sahel who are not necessarily, the lineage is not necessarily Jewish, but these are the bravest warriors we know, and we're very grateful for their help and their participation. All right, Shekoyach to here. We'll stop the recording. I see.